Yep, just want to take a picture, make sure someone doesn't come back 5 years from now and say this never happened. Cheers. So this is gonna be a rough one. Whew, another rough one. I was gonna do some film on this one and now I'm not. I'm gonna do another ex-Mormon one. Here we go. So in 1979, I was sitting in a small church meeting room waiting for a fireside to begin. Sitting about 8 feet from me was a very large ex-NFL football player getting ready to speak. I remember as a kid that his arms were like this big. The white shirt he was wearing, his tie, all that, his white shirt was stretched out as far as it could go because these arms are gigantic. I was riveted and I had no idea that the essence of this meeting was going to affect me later on in life. Okay, so today we're gonna make another film. It's gonna be a documentary, kind of like the Coke documentary we made back at like episode 2, I think it was. So when it comes to being a documentary, we have to do a little history and then we have to add that history with a little bit of personal experience because that always makes it really good and it brings the human element into the historical element, really, because without the human element, it's just an essay. And so for some of these facts, I'm gonna actually go to the LDS website, lds.org, where they try to explain away all of these things that people are pretty much going, doesn't add up. And when they're done explaining, it really just doesn't add up still. So here's a quick history. In 1852, Brigham Young stated officially that those of African descent, black people, were not able to have the Mormon priesthood or go to the Mormon temples. So hold on, what's the priesthood? The priesthood, which the Mormons believe is the authority to act in God's name, healing, blessing the sacrament, baptizing, or giving the gift of the Holy Ghost. And to be able to have the priesthood also means that you can then move up in the ranks of the church. And without it, well, without it. But wait, that's not all. People of color were also banned from being in the temples. It means that when you go in the temple and you take out endowments, you're also able to have your family sealed to you for time and all eternity, as they say, which of course is the ultimate promise. It is a huge reason to join the church. So basically be good and white and be able to be with your loved ones forever, unless you've unfriended them. So it's kind of a double whammy for black people of African descent. So this ban started in 1852 and ran until 1978. Yet another way of excluding people from the Mormon VIP room. But then again, considering Mormons only really take up about 0.02% of the population in the world, it doesn't really matter. So I know what you're thinking, the same thing I'm thinking. Why did this ban happen? I guess I'm gonna have to read the church website to get that one. So I'm gonna have to read this off my phone just to make sure I didn't screw it up. I'm just gonna cut right in and I'm gonna cut right out. And I'm sure someone's gonna get mad at me for that, but this is really the part that bugs me the most. Despite this modern reality, for much of its history, from the mid-1800s until 1978, the church did not ordain men of black African descent to its priesthood or allow black men or women to participate in temple endowment or sealing ordinances. The church was established in 1830 during an era of great racial division in the United States. At the time, many people of African descent lived in slavery, and racial distinctions and prejudice were not just common, but customary among white Americans. Those realities, though unfamiliar and disturbing today, influenced all aspects of people's lives, including their religion. Many Christian churches of that era, for instance, were segregated along racial lines. So their reasoning is that it's the way it was in the United States at that time. This is what was the norm. Like, slavery was okay. Not everyone did it. Of course, the northern states didn't like it and they didn't do it, so they were actually standing up to slavery. There's a lot of history research to be done right there if you're really interested in how Brigham Young himself felt about slavery. I'm pretty sure he had something to do with allowing slavery to get put into the Utah territory, but that's neither here nor there, as they say. But wait, I thought you said this church was different and that they were forward thinkers and that they were able to see the future and they had prophecy. God spoke to these people, so how does that work? This is a church that actually is led by revelation, which means that the leader of the church talks to God, he talks to God, and God talks to him and tells him things that should be done. That means that God had a lot to do with the fact that black people were not allowed to hold the priesthood of the church. There has to be a connection there, right? I doubt Brigham Young would make a huge statement like that without first checking with God, and God said, no. Yeah, black people, not in the priesthood. And then, okay, so when did slavery end? By the law books, no more slavery, 1865. Was Brigham Young still around in 1865? Of course he was. He died in 1877. So there's a period of time from 1865 to 1877 that Brigham Young could go, hey, God, maybe we should, what do you think about this? Giving black people the priesthood. Slavery's over. Everything's good, right? Everything's gonna get better now. Nope. So that means that the president after Brigham Young took over and he said, yeah, let's just, no, not time. You're talking several presidents afterwards, 112 years. All in all, what we're saying here is that God, through Brigham Young, banned black people, African black people, by the way. You do a little more digging, and what are you gonna find out? So Cain killed his brother Abel, and he was given a curse, and it was a mark. And the curse, according to Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, was black skin. Yeah, think about that one for a minute. Maybe that's why they couldn't get in the temple, because they had the curse of Cain? All right, so here's another reason that I heard growing up. And remember, these are things we heard in the church in 1978 when we were growing up, in the 70s and the early 80s. So here's the other concept, and that is that Mormons believe there's a war in heaven. Jesus, Satan, also called Lucifer. They had this war, I'm not gonna get into it, but there was a war. So because Lucifer lost, he kind of got offended, and he left. I guess he was the first ex-Mormon? So Jesus takes the other 2/3 of the spirits and they go that way, and those 2/3 are the spirits who come to earth to gain a body and become, I'm tired of having to explain other people's bullshit. So what Mormons say is that a small group of those people, those spirits that went with Jesus, they're called the less valiant, became the black people that are on earth. Again, this is one of those things that was taught to us in the 70s and the 80s, and there's always somebody nowadays who goes, oh yeah, but we all knew that was just BS. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You're just saying that now to cover your ass for the past, or to cover the ass of your dad, or your grandpa, or your stake president, or your bishop, one of those guys. You're covering their ass because it's only now that the world is PC that you guys are denying all of this stuff. Okay, so let's get back to the beginning of the video. I was talking about being 12 years old and sitting in church and looking at this large NFL player. Of course, he was a black man. This is 1979, and he has joined the church. Not sure why, but in 1978, the ban had been lifted. The church had changed it to where black people could now hold the priesthood and go in the temple. And so here was this guy, an ex-NFL player, probably someone everyone knew. Here he is sitting here telling us why he joined the church. And to be honest, I was 12 years old. I don't really remember everything he said. I don't even really remember his name. I just remember he had extremely big arms. Because when you're a kid and you're learning how to lift weights and stuff like that, that's impressive. And of course, the whole thing was impressive. That's why he was there. I'm sure the church said, hey, this is a faith-promoting experience. Let's bring in this guy. He's an NFL football player. So it wasn't until this summer of 1987 that this all had a really big impact on me. I was halfway done serving a 2-year mission for the Mormon Church. I was in South Carolina, Charleston, the Deep South, as some say, where we often had to explain why the people of color were kept from having the priesthood in the Mormon Church. This was a question we answered almost daily. Just imagine that conversation. You knock on someone's door. I was often advised by other missionaries who were older than me of how to deal with this, since we all had to deal with it in this part of the country. And that was to reference the Old Testament, where somewhere there is a place that talks about how there were 12 tribes of Israel, and for a time period, only the Levites, the one tribe, could hold the priesthood. The other tribes of Israel could not hold the priesthood. But I don't think it's a really good consolation for anyone who is listening to this story. It just sounds stupid. So what? That was like 2,000 years ago? And that explanation really only works to soothe the white man's guilt when he just kept the black man from having any power. Then one day, we all went to a special missionary gathering. All the missionaries in South Carolina, which I think was about 180 of us. And there's someone there from Salt Lake City to visit and teach us and tell us how to deal with things here in South Carolina. And in this case, I actually have photos to prove that I was there and he was there, because here we are, yep, right here, shaking hands. His name was Rex Pinniger. If you're a Mormon, you've been around a while, I'm sure you've heard of him. I think he was in the 70s. Anyway, he was here to edify us and give us his words of wisdom. The one takeaway I got from that, which was actually very helpful at the time, because of course we're like dealing with having to answer for somebody else's racism. When someone comes up to you and asks you, why did your church do this to black people? You struggle to tell these ridiculous answers. You're looking for a reason that's solid. It's a very weird place to be. So Rex got up in front of all of these missionaries, and when he finally got around to the topic of race and religion, he said, you need to be courageous and you need to be confident in the answer that you tell people. And that is that God decided this, that God told his prophet on earth, black people could not hold the priesthood for this amount of time. And that when he came back in 1978 and he talked to Spencer W. Kimball, that he also made the decision that black people could now hold the priesthood, no reason why, just that it is, and that God said so. Here we are, 19 to 21-year-old boys, that's right, there were some girls too, sorry, trying to say something that's very difficult. Why did we exclude black people for so long from the most important parts of the church? I mean, you don't join the church for any other reason. So anyway, he told us to be courageous and confident. Courageous and confident. Let's fast forward several years. I've now left the church. Now then 2005 comes around and YouTube is made available and somebody uploads this video. It's the video of Gordon B. Hinckley, the president of the Mormon Church at the time, and he is being interviewed by Mike Wallace on 60 Minutes. And guess what? That same question comes up. In fact, you know what? I'm not even gonna try to quote it. I'm gonna show you. Here it is.
From 1830 to 1978, blacks could not become priests in the Mormon Church, right?
That's correct.
Why?
Wow, this is amazing. I mean, did Rex Pinnaker get together with Gordon B. Hinckley beforehand and tell him to be courageous and confident in the answer that God gave us this rule, and God himself said that black people need to not be in the priesthood for a while, and then in 1978 he came back and said, I changed my mind. It's all good now. Black people can hold the priesthood and be sealed to their family. So let's see his answer.
Because the leaders of the church at that time interpreted that doctrine that way.
Church policy had it that blacks had the mark of Cain. Brigham Young said, Cain slew his brother, and the Lord put a mark upon him, which is the flat nose and black skin.
It's behind us. Look, that's behind us. Don't worry about those little flicks of history.
I guess he wasn't gonna be courageous and confident. He totally backpedaled out of that. The funny thing is, earlier in the conversation, he does say that God told people, that we shouldn't drink coffee and stuff like that. But he couldn't do it when it came to this topic, because that would be saying one thing, that God is racist. Or at least God was racist between the years of 1852 and 1978. It was a little bit of Nixon, wasn't it? Yeah. So if I were to make a documentary film about this racist, ridiculous conundrum, I would end it with a slow tracking shot in to the perplexed, questioning eyes of a 12-year-old boy who wondered what the hell just happened. Fade to cognitive dissonance.